January 17, 1945. Dawn broke cold and gray over Fort Devens, Massachusetts, where the frozen ground crunched beneath heavy military boots, and the morning air carried the sharp scent of disinfectant from the medical facilities. Inside the prisoner processing center, 23 German nurses sat in rigid silence, their white uniforms wrinkled and stained from the long transport across the Atlantic. These women, veterans of Wehrmacht field hospitals, Red Cross stations, and underground medical bunkers, clutched their few remaining possessions with trembling hands. Among them sat Margot Fischer, a 28-year-old surgical nurse from Bavaria who had spent 3 years treating wounded soldiers in the caves of Normandy, and Ingrid Müller, a Red Cross volunteer who had witnessed the collapse of German medical infrastructure in the final months of the war. Their eyes, hollow with exhaustion and fear, fixed upon the approaching American guards with the expectation of retribution that Nazi propaganda had promised would be their fate. The sound that would haunt their memories began as a soft rustle. The gentle unwrapping of fresh medical bandages in the adjoining American medical ward, clean, white, abundant rolls of cotton gauze, prepared with a care and precision that spoke of a medical system untouched by the desperation that had characterized their final months in German service. For these captured nurses, that sound represented everything they had been taught to fear, and everything they could never have imagined about American medical ethics. They had expected chains, humiliation, and the harsh justice of victors over the vanquished. Instead, they would encounter a systematic respect for medical professionals that would challenge every assumption they held about their captors and forever alter their understanding of what medicine could represent in times of war. The historical context of this moment extended far beyond the simple processing of enemy medical personnel. By January 1945, the American military medical system had evolved into the most sophisticated and ethically guided healthcare apparatus the world had ever seen. Over 59,000 American Army nurses had served throughout the war, establishing protocols for prisoner treatment that reflected not just military necessity, but deeply held convictions about the universal nature of medical ethics. The captured German nurses represented a unique category of prisoner, medical professionals whose skills were desperately needed, yet whose loyalties remained uncertain. American military doctrine, shaped by Geneva Convention requirements and reinforced by medical ethics training, mandated that enemy medical personnel be treated not as ordinary prisoners but as professional colleagues temporarily separated by the circumstances of war. The transformation of American military medicine during World War II had created institutional frameworks that prioritized medical need over national allegiance. American medical officers had been trained to recognize that healing transcended political boundaries, that the oath to first do no harm applied regardless of the nationality of the patient. This philosophical approach, deeply rooted in American democratic ideals about human dignity and professional respect, created operational procedures that German medical personnel had never experienced within their own military structure. The systematic dehumanization that characterized Nazi medical practices stood in stark contrast to American policies that maintained professional courtesy even toward enemy healthcare workers. For the German nurses awaiting processing at Fort Devens, their expectations had been shaped by years of Nazi propaganda describing American barbarism and systematic mistreatment of prisoners. They had been told that capture meant dishonor, assault, and likely death. Many had witnessed the harsh treatment accorded to captured Soviet medical personnel by German forces and assumed that similar retribution awaited them. Their final months of service had been marked by increasing desperation as medical supplies dwindled, equipment failed, and the infrastructure of German military medicine collapsed around them. They had operated in caves, treated patients without anesthesia, and watched helplessly as wounded soldiers died for lack of basic medical materials. The abundance they were about to witness would seem impossible, the respect they would receive incomprehensible. The first indication that their expectations might prove incorrect came when an American medical officer entered their holding area carrying a clipboard and wearing the insignia of the Medical Corps. Colonel James Mitchell, a veteran surgeon from Johns Hopkins Hospital, approached them with a demeanor that reflected neither hostility nor suspicion, but professional curiosity. His first words, delivered through a German-speaking interpreter, would echo in their memories for decades. "Ladies, we understand you are medical professionals. We would like to discuss your backgrounds and determine how your skills might be utilized during your time in our custody." The simple courtesy of being addressed as professionals, rather than prisoners, represented a conceptual framework, entirely foreign to their experience, of military hierarchy and enemy treatment. What followed defied every prediction. Nazi ideology had made about American character and democratic weakness. The German nurses were escorted not to punishment cells but to clean, well-lit barracks furnished with individual beds, adequate heating, and basic medical texts in German translation. Their personal medical instruments, confiscated during initial processing, were returned after cursory inspection, a gesture that acknowledged their professional identity and suggested trust that contradicted everything they had been taught about American duplicity. Most shocking of all, they were informed that qualified German medical personnel would be invited to observe American medical procedures and, if willing, to assist in treating wounded soldiers of all nationalities held at the facility. The symbolic power of medical bandages became apparent during their first tour of the American medical facilities. As the German nurses walked through ward after ward of the base hospital, they witnessed an abundance of medical supplies that seemed almost fantastical to women who had spent months rationing single-use items and performing surgery with improvised instruments. Rolls of pristine white bandages sat in unlimited quantities on supply shelves. Sterile surgical instruments gleamed in well-lit operating theaters. Medications that had become precious rarities in German hospitals were available in quantities that suggested an entirely different understanding of medical resource allocation. The administrative processing of the German nurses revealed the systematic nature of American respect for enemy medical personnel. Each woman was interviewed individually by medical officers who inquired not about military intelligence, but about their medical training, specializations, and experience. Their credentials were recorded with the same care accorded to American medical professionals. They were asked about their medical needs, dietary requirements, and professional interests. Most remarkably, they were informed of their rights, under the Geneva Convention, regarding medical personnel, protections they had never been told existed, and standards of treatment that exceeded anything they had experienced within German military medicine. The first direct encounter with American medical ethics came when Margot Fischer, the Bavarian surgical nurse, was invited to observe an operation on a wounded German prisoner. As she entered the American operating theater, she witnessed procedures and protocols that challenged her fundamental understanding of wartime medicine. The patient, a young Wehrmacht soldier captured during the Battle of the Bulge, received the same quality of care, the same attention to sterile technique, and the same post-operative monitoring that would be accorded to an American serviceman. When American surgical nurses noticed her presence, they acknowledged her with professional courtesy and even solicited her opinion on certain aspects of patient care. The abundance of medical supplies available to American forces represented more than material prosperity. It reflected a philosophical commitment to healing that German nurses had never witnessed in their own military service. Fresh bandages were changed daily rather than rewashed and reused. Surgical instruments were sterilized between each procedure rather than simply wiped clean. Medications were administered based on medical need rather than availability. Pain management protocols existed for all patients regardless of nationality. The contrast with their recent experience of German military medicine, where supplies were hoarded, equipment was shared between multiple medical units, and treatment decisions were often based on resource limitations rather than medical requirements, proved overwhelming. The respect accorded to their professional expertise manifested in unexpected ways throughout their captivity. American medical officers consulted with them about surgical techniques they had developed under battlefield conditions. Their knowledge of treating massive trauma with limited resources was recognized as valuable expertise that could benefit American medical practice. Several German nurses were invited to participate in medical case discussions, where their opinions were solicited and their suggestions implemented. The intellectual exchange that developed between German and American medical professionals created a form of professional collegiality that transcended national boundaries and demonstrated the universal nature of medical knowledge. The psychological impact of this treatment proved profound and lasting. Women who had entered American custody expecting abuse, humiliation, and harsh punishment found themselves treated as professional colleagues whose expertise was valued and whose dignity was respected. The cognitive dissonance between Nazi propaganda and American reality created a fundamental reevaluation of everything they had been taught about democratic values and American character. Many began to question not just their assumptions about their captors, but their understanding of the war itself and the cause they had served. The daily routine established for the German medical prisoners further reinforced American commitment to professional respect. They were housed in facilities comparable to those provided for American medical personnel. Their meals included adequate nutrition and variety, with attention paid to dietary requirements and cultural preferences. They were provided with medical journals, professional literature, and opportunities to maintain their medical knowledge during captivity. Most significantly, they were treated as medical professionals temporarily prevented from practicing their calling rather than as defeated enemies deserving punishment. The interaction between German nurses and their American counterparts revealed the transformative power of professional solidarity that transcended national boundaries. American nurses, many of whom had witnessed the horrors of battlefield medicine and understood the challenges faced by all medical personnel during wartime, extended professional courtesy that recognized shared experiences and common dedication to healing. These interactions, marked by mutual respect and professional interest, created personal relationships that challenged stereotypes and promoted understanding between former enemies. The medical supplies that surrounded the German nurses during their captivity became powerful symbols of American abundance and democratic values. The unlimited availability of bandages, medications, and medical equipment demonstrated a societal commitment to healing that reflected broader American values about human dignity and the sanctity of life. The willingness to expend these resources not just on American forces but on enemy prisoners and wounded enemy soldiers illustrated democratic principles that valued human life regardless of nationality or political affiliation. As weeks passed, the German nurses began to observe aspects of American military medicine that revealed deeper philosophical differences between democratic and authoritarian approaches to health care. American medical protocols emphasized patient advocacy, informed consent where possible, and systematic quality control measures that prioritized patient outcomes over administrative convenience. Medical decisions were made collaboratively by teams of professionals rather than imposed by hierarchical authority. Patient care standards were maintained regardless of the patient's rank, nationality, or political affiliation. The training programs available to American medical personnel reflected democratic values that emphasized education, professional development, and ethical responsibility. German nurses were permitted to observe American medical training sessions where they witnessed educational approaches that encouraged critical thinking, professional discussion, and ethical reflection. The contrast with German military medical training, which had emphasized obedience, efficiency, and ideological conformity, proved striking and enlightening. The gradual integration of German medical prisoners into the daily routine of American medical facilities demonstrated institutional flexibility and humanitarian commitment that challenged German assumptions about democratic weakness and inefficiency. Rather than creating security problems or administrative complications, the inclusion of German medical professionals actually enhanced the overall quality of medical care available to all patients. Their expertise in treating trauma under resource-limited conditions proved valuable in certain situations, while their presence provided opportunities for professional exchange that benefited all medical personnel involved. the personal relationships that developed between individual German and American nurses revealed the human dimension of professional solidarity that transcended national boundaries. Women who had been taught to view each other as enemies discovered shared experiences, common challenges, and mutual respect based on their dedication to healing. These personal connections, formed in the neutral territory of medical service, created understanding that would persist long after the war ended and contribute to post-war reconciliation between former enemies. The documentation of German nurse experiences in American custody provided evidence of systematic respect for enemy medical personnel that reflected broader American commitment to international law and humanitarian principles. Military records show that German medical prisoners received treatment that exceeded Geneva Convention requirements and demonstrated American dedication to maintaining high ethical standards, even in wartime conditions. These records, maintained with characteristic American attention to legal and administrative detail, would later serve as evidence of American commitment to humanitarian principles during wartime. The medical care provided to German nurses themselves during their captivity illustrated American commitment to health care that recognized no boundaries of nationality or political allegiance. When German medical personnel required medical attention, they received the same quality of care, the same attention to their needs, and the same respect for their dignity that was accorded to American medical professionals. This treatment, far from being exceptional, reflected systematic policies that prioritized medical need over political considerations. The intellectual stimulation available to German medical prisoners challenged Nazi stereotypes about American anti-intellectualism and democratic mediocrity. Access to current medical literature, participation in professional discussions, and exposure to advanced American medical techniques demonstrated the sophisticated nature of American healthcare and the high level of professional competence maintained by American medical personnel. Many German nurses found American medical practices more advanced and ethically sophisticated than what they had experienced in German military medicine. The administrative efficiency with which German medical prisoners were processed, housed, and integrated into American medical facilities demonstrated organizational capabilities that contradicted Nazi propaganda about democratic inefficiency and administrative incompetence. The systematic nature of American prisoner treatment, the attention to individual needs and professional qualifications, and the successful integration of enemy medical personnel into American medical operations revealed administrative sophistication that impressed even experienced German medical professionals. The religious and cultural sensitivity shown toward German medical prisoners reflected American commitment to religious freedom and cultural diversity that contrasted sharply with Nazi intolerance and ideological rigidity. German nurses were permitted to maintain their religious practices, observe cultural traditions, and express their beliefs without fear of punishment or persecution. This tolerance, extending even to enemy prisoners, demonstrated democratic principles that many German professionals had never encountered in practice. The post-war implications of the treatment accorded to German medical prisoners would extend far beyond the immediate wartime context. Many of these women would return to Germany with transformed understanding of democratic values, American character, and the possibilities for international cooperation in medical practice. Their experiences would contribute to post-war efforts to establish international medical ethics, standards, and promote cooperation between former enemies in medical research and practice. The transformation in German nurse understanding of American values occurred gradually but fundamentally as they witnessed daily demonstrations of respect, professional courtesy, and humanitarian concern that contradicted everything Nazi propaganda had taught them about democratic societies. The abundance of medical supplies, the quality of patient care, the respect for professional expertise, and the systematic attention to individual dignity combined to create experiences that challenged their basic assumptions about American character and democratic capabilities. The sound of fresh bandages being unwrapped, that simple everyday occurrence in American medical facilities, became for many German nurses a symbol of the abundance, respect, and humanitarian values they had discovered in American captivity. The contrast with their memories of rationed supplies, improvised equipment, and hierarchical disrespect in German military medicine created lasting impressions that would influence their post-war careers and their understanding of what medical practice could achieve when supported by democratic institutions and humanitarian values. The medical care provided to all patients in American facilities, regardless of nationality or military affiliation, demonstrated principles of medical ethics that transcended political boundaries and national loyalties. German nurses witnessed American medical personnel treating enemy soldiers with the same care and attention accorded to American forces, administering pain medication to German prisoners, and maintaining professional standards that prioritized patient welfare over political considerations. These observations challenged German understanding of wartime medical practice and revealed ethical standards that many had never encountered. The educational opportunities available to German medical prisoners reflected American commitment to professional development and intellectual growth that extended even to enemy personnel. Access to medical journals, participation in case discussions, and exposure to advanced medical techniques demonstrated democratic values that emphasized education, professional improvement, and the free exchange of ideas. Many German nurses found these opportunities more extensive and intellectually stimulating than what they had experienced. In German medical institutions, the personal dignity accorded to German medical prisoners throughout their captivity reflected systematic American respect for individual worth that transcended national boundaries and political affiliations. They were addressed by professional titles, consulted for their expertise, treated as colleagues rather than enemies, and accorded respect that recognized their contributions to medical knowledge and patient care. This treatment, far from being exceptional, reflected institutional policies that maintained professional courtesy even toward enemy personnel. As the war in Europe approached its end, the German nurses held at Fort Devens and other American facilities faced the prospect of repatriation with mixed emotions. Their captivity had provided them with experiences that challenged fundamental assumptions about American character, democratic values, and the possibilities for international cooperation in medical practice. Many had developed professional relationships with American medical personnel that they valued and hoped to maintain. Their understanding of medical ethics, professional standards, and humanitarian values had been transformed by exposure to American practices that demonstrated possibilities they had never imagined. The final processing of German medical prisoners for repatriation provided opportunities for American medical officers to document the impact of respectful treatment on enemy personnel and to gather information about German medical practices that could inform post-war medical cooperation. Many German nurses expressed gratitude for their treatment and indicated willingness to participate in post-war medical exchanges that could promote international cooperation in healthcare. The relationships formed during captivity had created foundations for future collaboration that would contribute to post-war reconciliation and international medical development. The white bandages that had symbolized American abundance and humanitarian values throughout their captivity would remain powerful symbols for German nurses as they returned to a devastated homeland where medical supplies were scarce and medical infrastructure had been destroyed. Their memories of American medical abundance, professional respect, and systematic attention to patient care would provide models for post-war reconstruction of German medical institutions and inspiration for maintaining professional standards under difficult conditions. The transformation experienced by German medical prisoners in American custody represented more than individual change. It demonstrated the power of democratic values and humanitarian principles to transcend national boundaries and political conflicts. The respect accorded to enemy medical professionals, the abundance of medical supplies, and the systematic attention to professional dignity had created experiences that challenged assumptions, promoted understanding, and contributed to post-war reconciliation between former enemies. In the quiet moments before repatriation, as German nurses packed their few possessions and prepared to return to an uncertain future in a defeated homeland, many reflected on the experiences that had transformed their understanding of American character and democratic values. The sound of fresh bandages being unwrapped in American medical facilities had become a symbol of abundance, respect, and humanitarian concern that would influence their post-war careers and their understanding of what medical practice could achieve when supported by democratic institutions and guided by humanitarian principles. The legacy of their treatment would extend far beyond their individual experiences to influence post-war development of international medical ethics, promotion of cooperation between former enemies, and establishment of standards for treatment of medical personnel during armed conflicts. Their testimony about American respect for enemy medical professionals would contribute to broader understanding of democratic values and help establish foundations for international cooperation in medical research and practice. The white bandage, simple, practical, abundant in American medical facilities, had revealed itself as a symbol of values that transcended national boundaries and political affiliations. It represented not just medical care, but respect for human dignity, commitment to professional excellence, and belief in the universal nature of healing that could unite former enemies in common cause. For German nurses who had experienced this abundance and respect during their captivity, the white bandage would forever symbolize the transformative power of humanitarian values and the possibility for reconciliation, even between the bitterest of enemies. The final irony was not lost on those who witnessed this transformation. Women who had entered American captivity as defeated enemies had discovered in their treatment a vision of medical practice and humanitarian values that would guide their post-war service and contribute to the reconstruction of German medical institutions along more democratic and humanitarian lines. The respect they had received as enemy prisoners would inspire them to extend similar respect to future patients and colleagues, creating ripple effects that would influence medical practice for generations to come. In the end, the sound of unwrapping bandages had proved more powerful than the sound of artillery, more transformative than the rhetoric of war, and more lasting than the hatreds that had divided nations. It had revealed the truth that healing knows no boundaries, that professional respect transcends political loyalties, and that humanitarian values possess the power to transform understanding and create foundations for lasting peace between former enemies. The white bandage, symbol of American abundance and democratic values, had become an instrument of reconciliation that would influence the post-war world in ways that battlefield victories never could.